Hello and welcome to another edition of Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
Someone told me last week that I'm known as the cool teacher at Pricing College, so thank you very much for that.
It wasn't me.
I actually made that up. Okay, so in today's episode, we want to talk about, I suppose, a concept that some people really will just introduce, and that is the concept of building an ecosystem and thinking about an ecosystem and thinking how that could benefit your business and if you can sell in that way. So really just to intro, what is an ecosystem? In theory, it's building a system that basically increases the chances that you will sell other things to people. Whether that is, the classic selling a printing machine and then printing, cartridges, or something like an espresso machine and then locking in that you have to sell them ongoing espresso pods. So that's a concept we will discuss today.
Yeah, when I think about this concept, I'm thinking to myself, it's yes, Aidan described it as a sales system, something that we can sell more of to customers, but actually beneath that there's an ecosystem, there's a whole business model change. But before we get on to that, what I was particularly interested in was how pricing can be used to make a new business model and sales model stickier, like more difficult for customers to get out of, but also more valuable to customers, so they wouldn't want to get out of this model, this new system or ecosystem that you've built. And thinking about that, Aidan mentioned Nespresso. Most people love Nespresso. Actually, I was a late adopter to the old Nespresso concept, but thinking back to it's a great business model, and it's a new one when you think about where Nespresso came from. So Nescafe and all of that was all built on the dry roasted coffee empire. But obviously the business model over years was declining. People wanted fresher barista coffee, but they also wanted the convenience of that coffee at home, but they didn't want to compromise on taste. So Nespresso was launched. And it really did, disrupt the market in a good way. It gave customers what they wanted. Thinking about the pricing, the actual machine itself was, priced considerably low for in comparison to the alternative. Now, the alternative was those. Do you remember those really fancy, sort of almost barista style? We have to grind your own coffee beans, etc. Now, they were priced considerably higher on a per unit basis compared to Nespresso. But the thing that really locked the customer into Nespresso wasn't the machine. This was the genius behind the idea at the time. It was the pods, which at a unit level were priced comparatively high. So you, as a customer, a naive customer at the time, you go in, you're going, wow, what a great business model. It's new, it seems great. Lovely little coloured pods as well, attractive, interesting. Oh, actually, the machine is pretty cheap. Yeah, I'll get that. Not really thinking about the total cost of getting that machine when you think of all those pods that you use over a year. Now, some people in Australia, gosh, they drink, 2 or 3 mega coffees, double, espresso, triple espresso a day. That's a lot of pods. And, it's a highly profitable part of their business. So the less profitable part of their business was the machine. So they disrupted that market. They thought we'll compromise on profit on that because we know that people will need to buy more of the pods, and they'll like to do that. And obviously they have to provide value with the taste and all of that stuff. It was a great taste. Obviously that's lasted over these years if people are still lining up to buy them. But anyway, that's the concept of how you can reinforce a new business model change with pricing, and use pricing as a way to make that business model change sticky, so customers find it very difficult to leave and they don't want to leave.
Yeah, and what I really like about this, and you'll also see it in another example, which is Apple, the electronics company. With an espresso, it's not. It doesn't integrate with other pods, other systems, and in reality, I suppose it's quite limited. It limits or blocks or creates a barrier to using other systems, which could be seen as a negative. It could be seen as a problem, but in reality, that problem is the real design genius, whereby, in your kitchen, you've got one system. Once you invest in that one system, you're probably unlikely to change, and you're probably very unlikely to invest in a second system that does something almost identical. So it's that sort of aspect whereby you're designing it, you are thinking about the long term, you're not thinking about the sale today, you're in the business of annuity style income and building that system, and you're locking other people out. The other thing I like about the ecosystem aspect of Nespresso, and this can be applied to other businesses, Apple's another example, is that it really tries to build this community, this sort of, I'd say it's almost a higher value community, I think, versus other coffees. They have Nespresso stores. They have this image of George Clooney, the actor. He might be getting a bit old now, but he's still this glamorous, individual who promotes the Nespresso and gives it an aspirational aspect. You have the Nespresso stores in many supermarkets, upmarket shopping centres, whereby it's almost just you can only buy this one brand, which is very unusual if you think about it. A shop that only sells one brand of consumer goods. We're used to supermarkets where you can buy everything. So that is an unusual approach, but it sort of builds the atmosphere. The other example I'll give is Apple, whereby they really have they've almost built a system that isn't open. It's not an open system. It almost prevents other things from getting into it, whereby even the plugs are different, their operating system's different, the apps in their app store, it can only be through Apple devices. And it builds a real community feeling. It builds a real closed system that really massively boosts their profits over time, because they sell everything to you. Once they get you in the door, once you bought your MacBook or your iMac or whatever they're called, they own you. Even small things about Apple that people have told me is that when they send a text message with an Apple phone, it comes up in a different way, and you can see that it's been read and stuff like that, and that people who have Apple phones do not like receiving text from Samsung or Android users. So it's almost strange peripheral things that reinforce that ecosystem.
I just want to go back to that point you made. It was a really good point about, this particular model is a longer term model. The annuity sort of system seems like an instant hit, but obviously you're taking smaller chunks, or you have to transform your business model to become that new annuity model, or the services or model that we're describing. Because Nespresso, in a way, they had to use brand to sort of make some noise in a very busy market, and it worked well for them. But I'm thinking for B2B, it's quite a difficult play. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think this is why, when I'm thinking about this, a lot of B2B businesses, it's making the sale now to hit target, because there's so many margin pressures at the moment, especially with inflation. We've got, supply issues. This sort of conversation almost seems like, oh yeah, that's a nice to have. Do we have time to change our business and pricing and sales model? But often, because it will take too long and we need the numbers right now. But I always think that's almost, it's short-term thinking. And, too many CEOs have thought that in the past, leading to often the problems we have now. And then, when I think mining, I think, manufacturing, and a lot of industrial companies, I've always had this secret, untapped profit potential in aftermarket, after parts servicing area, which they didn't exploit, because on the P&L, it didn't look, on the absolute terms, it didn't have the most revenue. It wasn't the most profitable, or it wasn't analysed in terms of growth rate, so it didn't seem the most profitable. But it's always been there as something that should have been nurtured over time. And some companies have, grasped that and taken it and gone invested in it to make the wholesale business model transformation to this type of market, even in B2B. Now, I'm thinking of a brand called Kaiser, who do air compressor engines. No, they were thinking, well, we can either sell the engine because that's what our customers are used to, or we can try and sell them the ecosystem, the after-service parts, the ongoing services, the machine learning and data, so we can improve and optimize the machine and the services. Now, and it worked very well for them, but it didn't happen overnight, because obviously customers weren't used to buying. They were buying from them in that way. They were used to buying the whole engine themselves. So, they had to disrupt the buying process as well, and that took time. It took marketing effort, it took new pricing model. In terms of pricing, what they had to do was show their customers what the total cost of buying that engine was, not just the unit cost, which was very expensive, but over time, if they were to buy their own engine, they would have to service it themselves, the maintenance, the downtime, etc. But strangely, the biggest cost to them was the energy cost to the customer. It was like 300 or 400% more expensive than the maintenance costs over time if they looked at over, a 5 to 10 year after purchase time frames. That's how long, the average compressor engine lasted. So here we've got two quite difficult challenges. How do you change your business model, and how do you change a market and a customer's perception about your products and make them buy differently so it becomes more profitable? So very difficult challenges, but it does require investment, and it requires people to think strategically. And as I go back to that point that Aidan made, often, people do consider this the long play, but often it's the thing that's going to save your business now. So it's thinking about these profitable opportunities and thinking how you can balance these opportunities with your BAU processes, which could be on the decline.
Yeah, look, I think this is probably a bigger topic that we'll come back to and dig into more specific examples. But, I suppose, any business, first thing is to think, you value discovery. What are you really selling? What is the best way of you're really charging for it? Are you selling the printer or are you selling the cartridges? It's that sort of mentality, and then it's looking at potential barriers to entry from competition and trying to increase those, really, try to make sure that those barriers are as high as possible, potentially without the customer knowing, and that could be getting something into their hand, getting a capital asset bought. Maybe it could be a loss leader. It could be selling below cost. It could be providing a capital asset to them. They only have space for one, and once you have one, you get it there. It could be providing an app to them. I think even the example of Uber, once you get that app downloaded, enter your details in, get used to using it, there's time and effort invested in it. It's not money, but it's time and effort. Have it on your phone. You're probably going to stay on that app. You're probably not going to go to Lyft or go back to booking a taxi. I'd be interested to know how many people, once they download the Uber app, go back to using taxis again. That would be an interesting study. I'm sure it's been done. But I think it's really trying to work out how you can increase those barriers to a third party, to someone shopping around and using other stuff without them being aware. I think warranties and guarantees are very useful. The classic car manufacturing is, you get the car, it's protected by a warranty as long as it only uses, official Toyota or whoever it is parts, which really locks you into that ecosystem. It locks you into going to the dealership. Once you go back to the dealership, you're probably more likely to buy a car from that dealership, I assume. If you're seeing the latest models, you're probably more likely to maybe do a trade-in at that dealership. So it's those sort of aspects. If you can build those barriers, and get something into their hand freely without them being aware of it. And this could even be as simple as free delivery, being the only one that does free delivery, no setup costs, no onboarding costs. Make that aspect as easy as possible. It's the old foot in the door. Get your foot in the door, and then potentially, it's harder to get you out of the door. That's why the saying became famous. That's really it for me. I think this topic is very large. I think we could probably dig into it, business by business almost, in the future. And that's probably, if people are interested, that's something we may do.
Well, I know my clients are talking more about this, but there's that urgency, as I was saying before, about, okay, we need to We need to drive cash flows now in light of the considerable margin pressures and inflation that we're facing. But at the same time, we know we need to be different. But how? How do we go about being different? What are the steps to take in terms of business strategy? How do I need to think differently about my customers? Because you've got to remember, a lot of B2B are naturally operations or manufacturing focused. It's very hard to get out of that mindset if your whole legacy has been built around day-to-day operations, making the product, as opposed to generating value for your customers. It's a very totally different mindset. And often the very people that are in those positions are struggling, and they recognise that. The good ones recognise that, and they want to change. But that's not disregarding the manufacturing, absolutely not. But there's a balance between customer value, manufacturing, and product innovation, and they should always be that competing force. And from there, that's how you gradually transform your business, by weighing up those three competing pressures in line with your business. But as Aidan said, yes, it's a huge topic. It's something that a lot of our clients are talking about. It's on their mind at the moment. So making money is also on their mind to cover the bills, to keep going. So, feel free to get in touch with us if any of this has struck a chord. Very happy to speak with you more about it. Okay, all right. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, and have a great week.